There is a door you closed once, and closing it cost you more than anyone will ever know. You stood on the other side of it with your hand shaking, and you told yourself you would never go back. And then, some quiet evening, the handle turns in your memory. A message arrives. A voice softens. A familiar face appears where you did not expect it, and something in you leans toward the door you swore you had sealed. This is the moment almost no one prepares you for. Not the leaving, the returning, the pull back toward the very thing that emptied you. Most people believe that if you survive something once, you can survive it again. That belief is where the damage begins. Because surviving a thing is not the same as being unharmed by it, and going back into what nearly broke you is not strength. It is forgetting. It is the slow erosion of a lesson your peace already paid for in full. There is a difference between what people tell themselves about return and what is actually true, and it is worth putting on the table before another word is spoken. People tell themselves that going back is brave, that it shows growth, that only a hardened heart refuses a second chance. The truth is quieter and less flattering. A second chance offered to your peace is not always mercy. Sometimes it is a trap wearing mercy's face. And the softness you feel when you consider walking back through that door is not always love. Sometimes it is only memory, and memory has no interest in protecting you. Consider how the world praises the person who forgives and returns, and how rarely it praises the person who forgives and stays gone. There is a whole vocabulary built to shame the one who does not go back. Cold, they say. Unforgiving. Hard. And that vocabulary does its work quietly, because you carry it inside you long after anyone said it aloud, and it whispers to you on the very evening you most need your own clarity. So before anything else, understand that the pull to return is not always your own heart speaking. Sometimes it is the borrowed voice of everyone who ever told you that endurance meant staying, and grace meant softening. Here is what will be laid out plainly, without decoration. First, why the door reopens at all, and why the pull is strongest exactly when you are healing. Second, 3 signs that tell you, before your heart can argue, that a door should stay shut for the rest of your life. Third, what to do with your hands and your mouth and your silence when the door begins to creak. And last, what it costs a person to reopen that door one time too many, told through someone who did exactly that. You already know most of this. You have simply never heard it said without someone trying to soften it for you. So it will not be softened here. Peace is expensive. That is the first thing that must be understood before anything else makes sense. When you finally reached peace, you did not stumble into it. You bought it. You paid with sleepless nights and swallowed words. You paid with the friendships that fell away when you stopped explaining yourself. You paid with the version of you that used to beg to be understood, and you buried that version quietly, without a funeral, because no one else knew she had died. Peace was not given to you. It was earned, coin by coin, in a currency no one else can see. And because it costs so much, you must understand what it means to hand it back. A door that costs you your peace is not an ordinary door. It is not a disagreement you can revisit. It is not a person you simply outgrew. It is a passage into a place where your dignity was slowly negotiated away, one small concession at a time, until you looked up and did not recognize the person answering to their name. That kind of door does not cost you a fight. It costs you yourself. People think the danger of a bad door is in the loud moments, the betrayal, the shouting, the day everything fell apart. That is not where the cost lives. The cost lives in the 1,000 quiet mornings you spent making yourself smaller so the room would stay calm. It lives in the way you learned to read a mood before you had finished waking up. It lives in how you stopped saying what you meant because saying it never changed anything, and silence was cheaper than being misunderstood again. That is the real price, not the storm, the weather you lived in every single day. Sit with that word, weather. A storm passes, and everyone can see it pass, and everyone will comfort you when the storm is over. But weather is what you breathe. It is the pressure in the room before anyone has spoken. It is the way your shoulders climb toward your ears without your permission. Nobody comforts you for weather, because nobody outside the room could ever see it. You lived in a climate that slowly reshaped you, and you called it normal because you had no other name for it. That is what the door truly cost you, not the dramatic days, the daily ones. Think about how the body adapts to a climate. Move a person to a cold country and their blood thickens. Their habits change. They forget what warmth even felt like until a single unexpected day of sun reminds them. That is what a hard door does to a person over the years. You adapt. You thicken. You forget the temperature of ease. And that forgetting is the most dangerous part of all, because a person who has forgotten what warmth is will call any small kindness a summer, even when it comes from the very place that froze them. So when the door reopens, it never shows you that weather. It shows you the good hour. It shows you the version of things that made you stay in the first place. This is the trick, and it is worth naming clearly, because it works on almost everyone. A door that took your peace does not knock again looking the way it did when you left. It knocks wearing its best face. It remembers, somehow, exactly what you missed, and it offers you precisely that, and nothing else. The comfort without the cost, the warmth without the winter, and you, standing there, healed enough to be curious, but not healed enough to be certain, feel your resolve begin to bend. Understand this. The door is not offering you what it was. It is offering you what you hoped it would be. And those two things have never once been the same. There is a reason the pull comes strongest when you are doing well. When you were in pain, you had clarity. Pain is honest that way. It keeps the truth in front of your eyes because you cannot afford to look away. But peace is quieter, and quiet has a strange effect on memory. In the calm, the sharp edges of what happened begin to blur. You start to wonder if it was really as bad as you remember. You start to give the benefit of the doubt to something that never once gave it to you. Your own healing becomes the thing that argues for your return. Notice the cruelty in that. The healthier you become, the more generous your memory grows toward the thing that harmed you. This is not a defect in you. It is simply what a settled mind does. A settled mind wants peace so badly that it will edit the past to keep the present calm. It rounds off the corners. It quiets the worst nights. It lets the good hours stand in front of the long winters and blot them from view. And so the very peace you fought for becomes the ground on which you are most likely to lose it. You have to know this about yourself, or the knowledge will not be there when you need it. There is a mechanism inside this worth naming slowly, because understanding it is half the protection. When you were in the middle of the harm, your mind had a job to do. It had to keep you functioning inside something intolerable, and so it dulled the edges even then, softened the blows, told you it was manageable so that you could get through another day. That same mercy that kept you alive inside the door now works against you outside of it. The mind that once minimized your pain so you could survive continues minimizing it now in peacetime. And it does not know the war is over. So it keeps handing you a gentler version of the story, and you mistake that gentleness for perspective, when it is really just the old survival habit still running long after its purpose is done. This is not weakness. This is how a human heart works, and you should not be ashamed of feeling the pull. Feeling it and following it are two entirely different things. There is something almost nobody sees here, and it is this. The distance between being at peace and being lonely is smaller than you think, and a reopening door knows how to stand in exactly that gap. It waits for the evening you feel unneeded. It waits for the anniversary, the empty chair, the silence that used to be filled by that voice. It does not come for you when you are strong. It comes for you when you are tender. And it calls that tenderness a sign that you were meant to go back. You were not meant to go back. You were meant to feel the ache and let it pass through you without picking up the phone. The truth that separates the people who keep their peace from the people who lose it, again, is simple and hard. Missing something is not the same as needing it. You can miss a thing that was destroying you. You can grieve a person who was never good for you. The grief is real, and it does not mean you were wrong to leave. It means you loved something or hoped for something, and the hope died slowly. Grief for a closed door is proof that you are human. It is not evidence that the door should open. So learn to hold this without flinching. You will miss things that harmed you. You will feel warmth for people who showed you contempt. That is the strange geometry of the human heart, and it is not a flaw in your judgment. Your judgment is fine. Your memory is simply being generous with something that was never generous with you. There is a discernment that has to grow in you here, slow and steady. And it is the discernment between the ache and the instruction. The ache says, I remember warmth. The instruction says, go back and get it. The ache is honest and harmless. The instruction is where the danger lives. A person of quiet strength learns to feel the ache fully and refuse the instruction completely. And this is not a talent anyone is born with. It is built. It is built by feeling the pull 100 times and staying put 100 times, until staying put becomes the thing your body does on its own. Understand that this discernment does not arrive all at once, and it does not arrive the first time you need it. It arrives the way a muscle arrives, through the boring repetition of doing the hard thing when the easy thing is calling. Every evening you feel the ache and do not act on it. You lay down another layer of that discernment. Every message you leave unanswered, every impulse you let rise and fall without obeying it, teaches your own nervous system that the ache is survivable, that it passes, that it was never the emergency it pretended to be. And one day you notice that the pull has come and gone, and you did not even reach for the phone, because your body had already learned what your mind kept arguing about. Now the door is in front of you again, and you need to know how to read it. There are 3 signs. Learn them, because your feelings will not warn you in time. Your feelings will be busy remembering the good hour. The first sign is the one people ignore the longest, and it is the simplest to test. When a door truly deserves to be reopened, the person on the other side of it has changed on their own. Before you arrived, without you as the reason. That is the whole sign. Change that happened in your absence, not change that appears the moment you return. Understand why this matters so much. A person who genuinely became different did so because something inside them shifted. They looked at their own life and were unwilling to keep living it that way. That kind of change is slow, and it is quiet, and it does not need an audience. It happened whether you ever came back or not. When you meet a person like that again, you can feel it. They are not performing growth for you. They simply are different. And they would be different even if you turned and walked away for good. But the change that appears the instant you return is a different creature entirely. It arrives with an apology that is really a request. It says all the right words, but the words are aimed at moving you, not at meaning something. It is warmth deployed like a tool, and the test is brutal in its simplicity. Watch how long the change survives once you are back inside the door. A performance cannot hold. A person calibrates their treatment of you to what you will accept, and the moment they feel you have settled back in, the calibration returns to what it always was. Picture it plainly. Someone left a place that gave them nothing but strain. Months pass. They rebuild. Then a message comes, full of remorse, full of promises, full of everything they never said before. And the person, tired and tender, decides that this much feeling must mean something changed. So they go back. And for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, the door is everything it promised. And then a small thing goes wrong, and the old face returns, and the person realizes they have not walked into a new house. They have walked into the same house on the one day it was cleaned for company. Learn the shape of that phrase, cleaned for company. A house cleaned for company is not a changed house. It is the same house, arranged for a few hours to pass an inspection it knows is coming. And you can tell the difference if you are patient, because a house that is genuinely different stays different on the ordinary Tuesday when no one is watching and no one is expected. Real change does not tidy itself the moment you approach. It was already tidy, for its own sake, long before you thought of returning. There is a second thing worth naming inside this first sign, because people miss it constantly. When someone changes for real, they do not keep a ledger of your return. They do not treat your coming back as the reward they were owed. A person who has truly grown will be glad to see you and still be at peace if you never appear, because their change was for themselves and not a lure for you. But the door that only wants you back will treat your return as payment. It will act as though your presence settles a debt. And that alone tells you the change was never real, because real change asks for nothing. Watch, too, for the way an unchanged door talks about the past. A door that has truly examined itself can name what it did without you prompting it, plainly, without softening it into a misunderstanding that was somehow half your fault. It does not say we both made mistakes when the mistakes were not shared. It does not reach for the word if in its apology, as in I'm sorry if you felt hurt, because that little word hands the injury back to you and keeps its own hands clean. The door that has not changed cannot resist that word. It apologizes in a way that quietly puts you back on trial. And you will hear it if you are listening for it, because your peace has sharpened your ear for exactly this. So here is what you do with this sign. You do not test it by going in. You test it from the doorway. You watch over time from a distance safe enough to protect your peace. Real change does not need you to prove itself. It continues to exist while you observe it and decide slowly. Anything that demands your immediate return as the price of believing it was never change at all. It was bait, wearing the clothes of an apology. Time is the only honest witness a reopening door has. Give it time and give it distance, and let it fail the test on its own if it is going to. A performance is exhausting to keep up, and no one keeps it up forever. If you refuse to rush, you will almost always be shown the truth, because the truth is simply what a thing does when it grows tired of pretending. Your patience is not weakness here. It is the slow flame under which every false change eventually reveals itself. The second sign lives in your body before it ever reaches your mind. Notice what happens to you when the door reopens, not what you think, what you feel in your chest, your shoulders, your stomach. A door that deserves to open again brings ease. A door that should stay shut brings a particular kind of tightening, a bracing, the old familiar readiness to defend yourself. Your body remembers what your heart is trying to forgive. This is worth sitting with, because people override this signal constantly. They feel the tightening, and they call it nervousness, and they push through it as if courage means ignoring what your own body is telling you. But your body kept the record when your mind was too busy hoping. It logged every time you had to be on guard. It learned to tense at a certain tone of voice, to hold its breath at a certain silence, to prepare for impact before the impact came. That was not anxiety. That was accurate memory, stored where you could not talk yourself out of it. Think about how much wiser the body is than the story you tell about it. The mind will forgive and rewrite and hope and make excuses and give second chances long after they are warranted. The body does none of this. The body simply records what happened and readies itself for it to happen again. When your stomach drops at the sound of a familiar name, that is not you being dramatic. That is decades of accurate observation compressed into a single reflex. You spent years learning that a certain person meant a certain kind of danger, and your body will not unlearn that just because your heart has grown lonely. There is a reason to trust the body over the mind in this particular matter, and it is worth understanding. The mind is the part of you that can be talked to. It can be reasoned with, flattered, persuaded, worn down by a good enough argument delivered on a lonely enough night. The body cannot be argued with. It does not care about the beautiful words in the message. It does not care about the apology or the promise or the story of how things will be different. It only knows what actually happened over and over in the years you lived inside that door. And so when everything in your mind is leaning toward yes and something low in your gut is quietly saying no, it is the gut that has read the situation correctly, because the gut is the only part of you that cannot be sweet-talked. So when the door reopens and you feel that old bracing return, pay attention. Your body is not confused. Your body is doing exactly what it learned to do to keep you safe. And the fact that it still tenses, even now, even after all this healing, is telling you something your heart is trying very hard not to hear. Consider a person who returned to a door that had cost them everything, and who noticed, on the first evening back, that they had already begun watching their words, already choosing carefully, already reading the room. They had walked back in for less than an hour, and their whole body had resumed the old work of self-protection without being asked. That is the sign, not what was said, what the body did without permission. Consider another, a person who agreed to a single meeting, telling themselves it was only coffee, only an hour, only closure, and they dressed carefully, not out of vanity but out of armor, and they rehearsed what they would say on the drive over, and they felt their jaw tighten as they parked. Every one of those small acts was the body preparing for a fight it remembered even when the mind insisted the war was over. They had not yet said a word to the person, and their whole system was already at battle stations. That is a full answer, delivered before a single sentence is spoken. Consider a third, quieter still, a person who read the message and felt, before any thought at all, a small sinking in the chest, the particular heaviness of a weight returning to a shoulder that had only just set it down. They could not have explained it. There were no words in it yet. But the body knew that the message was not a gift. It was a job, and the job was the old one of managing someone else's needs at the cost of their own. The heaviness was the truth arriving ahead of the reasoning. And the person who has learned to trust that heaviness has learned the single most reliable instrument they own. Ease is the mark of a place you belong. Vigilance is the mark of a place that costs you. And your nervous system knows the difference long before your reasoning does. What do you do with this sign? You honor it. You do not argue with it. When your body braces at a reopening door, you treat that as information, not as a problem to overcome. You let the tightening be a full sentence. It is telling you that peace and this door cannot occupy the same space, and it is right, and it has always been right, and it was right when you left. The third thing people miss is the hardest, because it hides inside hope. A door should stay shut when the only thing pulling you back is the story of what it could have been, not what it was, what it could have been, in the version you have been rehearsing in your mind for years. You know this story. You have told it to yourself in the dark. The story where they finally understood, the story where the words you needed were finally said, the story where the door became the home you always wanted it to be. And that story is powerful because you wrote it, and you wrote it lovingly, and it feels like a memory even though it never once happened. When the door reopens, it is not offering you the past. It is offering you a chance to finally live the story you invented to survive the past. And that is the most dangerous offer of all, because it uses your own hope as the hook. Be very clear with yourself here. Grieving what could have been is not the same as being owed it. You can mourn the version of things that never came to pass. You are allowed to feel the loss of a future you had already furnished in your imagination. But mourning it and returning to chase it are different acts entirely. One is healing. The other is walking back into an empty room and insisting the furniture is real. There was a person who kept a door half open for years, not because of what the door had given them, but because of a single sentence they were still waiting to hear, an acknowledgement, a recognition of what they had endured. They believed that if they went back, this time the sentence would finally come, and everything would be redeemed. So they returned, again and again, and the sentence never came, because the door had never had that sentence to give. And each return cost them another year of the peace they could have been building instead. Understand what that person was really doing, because it is more common than anyone admits. They were not returning to a person, they were returning to a wound, and asking the wound to heal itself. They wanted the very source of the injury to become the source of the repair, and it cannot work that way, and it has never once worked that way for anyone. The thing that broke you does not have the tools to mend you. Asking it to is like returning to a dry well every evening with a bucket, insisting that this time it must have filled. Sit with the image of the dry well, because it is exact. A dry well is not cruel to you. It is simply empty, and it was empty yesterday, and it will be empty tomorrow, and no amount of returning with your bucket changes what a well without water can give. Your thirst is real. Your thirst is not the problem. The problem is standing at a well that has never once had water and treating your own thirst as proof that the water must be down there somewhere. It is not, and every evening you spend lowering your bucket into that dark is an evening you are not spending walking to the water that actually exists somewhere else, in a life you have not yet let yourself build. The story of what could have been is seductive precisely because you control it completely in your imagination and not at all in reality. In your mind, they say the words. In your mind, they see you clearly at last. In your mind, the ending is fair. But you cannot import that ending into the real door, because the real door has no interest in your version. It only ever had its own. And every hour you spend trying to make the real match, the imagined, is an hour subtracted from the actual life you could be building somewhere the story is not needed. Here is the discernment that saves you. Ask what you are actually going back for. If the answer is the thing itself, the real door as it truly was, then your body already told you the truth in the second sign. But if the answer is a sentence, a moment, a version, an ending you can live with, understand that you cannot get that from the door. You can only give it to yourself. The closure you keep returning to find was always yours to write, alone, without the door's permission. Understand what closure actually is, because the word has been sold to you wrong. You have been taught that closure is something another person hands you, a final conversation, an apology, a moment of being truly seen by the one who refused to see you. That closure does not exist, and waiting for it will keep a door open for the rest of your life. Real closure is a decision you make on your own. The quiet moment you stop requiring the other person to agree that you were hurt in order for your hurt to be real. It is the day you let the account go unsettled because you have understood at last that it was never going to be settled by them, and that your peace does not require their signature. That is closure. You do not receive it. You grant it to yourself. And then you walk. So what do you do when the door begins to creak, and the pull is real, and you are only human? You act. Feelings are weather, and you do not build a house on the weather. You build on what you decide to do with your hands and your time and your voice. Here is what to do in 3 plain movements. The first movement is about distance, because distance is the container that holds your discernment. When a door reopens, the pull is strongest in the moment of contact. So you build space between the pull and your response. You do not answer the message the hour it arrives. You do not decide anything in the emotion of the evening. You give yourself the ordinary mercy of time. Let a day pass. Let a week pass. A door that deserves to be reopened will still be there after you have slept on it. And a door that only wanted to catch you off guard will show its impatience when you do not rush. This is not a game, and it is not strategy. It is simply the refusal to make a permanent decision from a temporary feeling. Detachment is the word for this. And detachment does not mean coldness. It means you have unhooked your immediate reaction from your final answer. You feel the pull fully, and you do not let the pull hold the pen. Practically, this means you decide in advance, while you are calm, what your response to a reopening door will be. You write it down if you must. You tell one trusted person so that your resolve does not live only inside your own head where it can be talked out of. And when the door creaks, you return to what you decided when you were clear, not to what you feel when you are tender. The calm you draw on tonight is the calm you stored on a stronger day. There is a smaller practice inside this one, and it is worth naming. When contact comes, do not open the door even a crack to see who is there. Do not reply with a single friendly word just to be polite. Do not send the short message that seems harmless, because a door does not need to be flung wide to lose your peace. A crack is enough. A crack lets in the voice, and the voice does the rest. So when you build distance, build it fully. Silence is not rudeness in this. It is the sealing of the crack before the draft can find it. Understand what a single reply actually does, because it seems so small that people cannot believe it matters. A single reply tells the door that you are still reachable. It moves you from the category of a person who has gone to the category of a person who might return, and those are entirely different countries. As long as you are silent, the door does not know where you stand, and its own uncertainty keeps it at a distance. The moment you answer, even to say, "Please leave me alone," you have told it that the line is open and that the right words, sent enough times, will find you home. You have not closed the conversation. You have scheduled the next one. This is why the wisest silence is complete, not partial. A door speaks to whatever answers it, and the only answer it cannot use is none. And there is one more thing about distance that people underestimate. Distance is not only measured in days. It is measured in what you allow into your attention. If you still watch for their name, still check whether they have appeared, still keep a small window open to whatever they are doing, you have not built distance at all. You have built a waiting room and called it moving on. Real distance means the door leaves your daily attention entirely, so that when it does creak, it finds you living a life it is no longer part of. The second movement is about your voice, and specifically about how little of it you owe. When a door reopens, you will feel the pull to explain, to lay out why you left, to make them finally understand, to have the conversation you have had 100 times in your head. Resist this completely. The cost of explaining yourself to someone committed to misreading you is your peace, spent for nothing. You do not owe an account of your boundaries to the person your boundaries were built to protect you from. You do not have to justify a closed door to the thing on the other side of it. A boundary that requires the other person's agreement to exist is not a boundary. It is a request, and you are past the age of requesting what should have been given freely. Your no is complete on its own. It does not need to be understood to be honored. So when the door reopens and asks for an explanation, you offer silence, or you offer very few words, and you offer no debate at all. Silence does something argument never can. Argument keeps you tangled, keeps you present, keeps you supplying the energy the door needs to stay open. Silence closes the circuit. It is not rudeness, and it is not avoidance. It is the composure of a person who has already decided and feels no need to be understood by someone who never tried. Let your restraint be the whole message. It says more than 1,000 explanations, and it costs you nothing. Understand the mechanics of why the explanation fails, because you have tried it before and you already suspect this is true. The person committed to misreading you does not lack information. They lack the willingness to see you correctly, and no amount of new information corrects an unwillingness. You could explain yourself with perfect clarity for an hour, and they would take from it only the parts they can use to pull you back. Your words become their raw material. Every reason you give becomes a place for them to press. This is why the wise stop explaining, not because they cannot find the words, but because they have learned the words will be turned against the peace they were meant to defend. There is a particular trap inside the explanation that deserves its own light, and it is this. The moment you begin to explain, you have quietly accepted that the other person is your judge. You have agreed to stand before them and make your case, as though your freedom depended on their verdict. But you are not on trial. You left. That was the verdict, and you were the one who delivered it, and it does not require a second hearing. Every time you explain, you reopen the courtroom and hand the gavel to the very person who wronged you. A person of quiet strength does not argue their case to their former captor. They simply do not appear. The absence is the answer, and it is a complete one. There is a quiet strength in the sentence you do not send. There is a dignity in the argument you decline to have. Practice this, because the door will bait you toward speech, and every word you give it is a hinge you oil. And here is a practical form of this restraint you can use tonight. When the pull to explain rises, write the whole explanation down, every word of it, in private, addressed to no one. Pour it all onto the page. Then do not send it. You will find that the need to be understood was real, but the need to be understood by them was not. The page received your truth. The door never needed to. This is how you honor the feeling without spending your peace on it. Do this as often as the pull returns, and keep the pages. There is something clarifying in reading, weeks later, the letter you did not send, because you will see in your own words how much of you the door was still holding, and you will feel that grip loosen a little more each time you choose the page over the phone. The unsent letter is not a defeat. It is a place to put down what you are carrying, so that your hands are free to keep living. The third movement is about filling the space the door wants to occupy. A reopening door works best on an empty evening. It finds you in the gap, in the loneliness, in the hour that used to be full. So you do not leave that hour empty. You give your solitude something to hold. This is the quiet labor of protecting your peace, and it is done long before the door ever creaks. Build a life so full of your own presence that there is no vacancy for the door to move into. This does not mean crowding your days to avoid your feelings. It means the opposite. It means letting your solitude become something you actually inhabit, rather than a waiting room for someone to return and rescue you from it. Solitude that you have made peace with is the strongest lock a door will ever meet, because when you are whole in your own company, the door has nothing to offer you that you do not already have. Notice what solitude returns to a person who has spent decades being needed. It returns their own voice, which they had not heard in years under all the reading of other people's moods. It returns the mornings that belong to no one but them. It returns the strange, terrifying, wonderful discovery that they are enough of a companion for themselves. A person who has found this is very hard to lure back through any door, because the door was only ever offering to fill a room that is no longer empty. Consider how much of your old self was spent being needed. You were the one who managed the moods, who smoothed the room, who carried the weight of keeping everyone else comfortable. And somewhere in all that carrying, your own presence went quiet. You forgot the sound of your own preferences. You forgot what you liked when no one was asking anything of you. Solitude gives that back, slowly. And the giving back is not a consolation prize for being alone. It is a recovery. It is the return of a person you set down years ago so that you could carry someone else. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude that no one teaches you until you have lived it. And learning it changes everything. Loneliness is the ache of a room that should be full and is not. Solitude is the peace of a room that is exactly as full as you want it. They can happen in the same chair, on the same evening, with the same silence in the house. What changes is not the circumstance. What changes is your relationship to your own company. The reopening door preys entirely on loneliness, and it has no power at all over solitude, because solitude is not waiting for anyone. And the slow work of turning one into the other is the surest protection you will ever build, more reliable than any resolve, because it removes the very hunger the door was counting on. So the practical work is this: tend your solitude before you need it to be strong. Build the mornings, the small rituals, the presence in your own life that makes you a full house. And when the door reopens and offers to fill the space, you can honestly say the space is taken. You live there now. Make this concrete. Choose the hours that are most dangerous to you, the evening, the anniversary, the empty Sunday, and give them a shape of their own before the door can. Fill them not with noise, but with something that is truly yours. A walk you take alone, A meal you make for the pleasure of it, and not because anyone expects it. A room arranged the way you want it, with no one to please but yourself. These are not distractions. They are the furniture of a life that belongs to you. And a life that belongs to you cannot be repossessed by a door you already left. Go further still. Learn one thing you always set aside because someone else's needs came first. Take up the small skill, the language, the craft, the quiet interest that used to feel selfish to want. It does not matter what it is. What matters is that it is yours, chosen by you, answering to no one. Because a person building something of their own has a center of gravity that no reopening door can pull them off. The door offers to be your center again. You decline, not with a speech, but with the simple fact that you already have one. Consider now what it costs to get this wrong. Because the cost is real and it is quiet and it accumulates. There was a person who understood every word of this and still reopened a door they had closed with great effort. They knew the change was a performance. They felt the old bracing return on the first evening. They knew, somewhere, honest, that they were going back for a story and not a reality. And they went anyway, because the ache was loud and the evening was empty and the good hour the door showed them was very convincing. For a while it was almost worth it. That is the cruelty of it. The reopened door gives you a season of relief, and the relief feels like proof that you were right to return. The loneliness lifts. The familiar warmth comes back. You tell yourself that people were too harsh, that it was never as bad as you remembered, that this time is different because you are different, and that season is exactly long enough to dismantle the boundaries you built, and no longer. Then the small thing went wrong, the way it always does, and the old face returned, and the person found themselves standing in the same weather they had escaped years before. Only now something worse was true. Now they had proven to themselves and to the door that their leaving could be undone. The boundary they had paid so dearly for had been shown to be negotiable, and a boundary that has been crossed once is far harder to hold the second time, because both of you now know the price at which it can be bought. That is the real cost, and it is not the pain of being back. It is the loss of your own word to yourself. When you reopen a door you swore you would keep closed, you teach yourself that your decisions are not final, that your peace is a bargaining chip, that your leaving is a threat you do not carry out. And the person you become after that is quieter and smaller and less able to trust her own no. That erosion is the true price, paid not in one dramatic moment, but in the slow leak of self-respect that follows a broken promise to yourself. Understand how far that erosion reaches, because it does not stay contained to the one door. Once you have taught yourself that your no can be reopened, that lesson spreads. You begin to hold every boundary a little more loosely, because some part of you now knows that you are the kind of person who goes back. Your standards become suggestions. Your resolve develops a hairline crack that other people learn to lean on. The betrayal here is not the doors. It is the one you commit against yourself, and it is the only betrayal in this whole matter that you had the power to prevent. There is a further cost, quieter than all the others, and it is the one that lingers longest. When you go back to a door you swore you had closed, you do not only lose ground with that door, you lose a little of your faith in your own judgment. The next time your discernment tells you clearly that something is wrong, a small voice will answer, "But you were sure last time too," and you went back anyway. And so your own true reading of a situation gets harder to trust, drowned out by the memory of the time you overrode it. This is how a person slowly becomes a stranger to their own instincts. Every reopened door does not just cost you peace. It costs you a measure of your ability to know, cleanly and without doubt, what you already know. The person in this account eventually left again, but the second leaving cost more than the first, because the second time they had to grieve not only the door, but their own foolishness in reopening it. They had to forgive themselves for something they had already known better than. And that is a harder forgiveness than any the door ever demanded. There is one more turn to this that must be said, because it is where the endurance truly lives. That second leaving, painful as it was, taught the person something the first could not. It taught them that they could survive not only the door, but their own mistake, and rise from it, and rebuild the piece a second time with their eyes fully open. The scar of it became a kind of armor. They never mistook a good hour for a changed house again. So even the worst version of getting this wrong can become the ground of a deeper resilience, if you let the lesson finish teaching you, and refuse to spend it going back a third time. So carry this with you. The door will always argue that reopening it costs only a little. A conversation, a visit, a single evening. It never mentions that the thing you are really spending is the evidence you have been building that your word to yourself means something. That evidence is your dignity, and it does not survive being spent lightly. The most self-possessed people are not the ones who never feel the pull. They feel it as sharply as anyone. They are simply the ones who have learned that a feeling can be true and still not be an instruction. They ache, and they do not move. They grieve, and they keep the door shut. They let the pull rise and crest and fall, and they are still standing where they chose to stand when it is over. That is not coldness. That is the deepest kind of self-respect there is, the kind that keeps its promises to itself even when no one is watching, and even when it hurts. Understand that this standing still, this stillness in the face of the pull, is not passivity. It is the hardest active thing a person can do. Anyone can leave in the heat of a bad day. It takes a rarer strength to stay gone on a tender evening when every soft feeling you own is arguing for return. The carriage of a person who has done this is unmistakable. They move through the world with a settled quality, a composure that comes not from never having been hurt, but from having refused to hand their peace back once they had won it. That is grace. Not the absence of the wound, but the refusal to reopen it. And here is the thing almost nobody tells you about that stillness. It gets easier, not the ache. The ache may always come on certain evenings, but the standing still gets easier, because each time you do it, you become more, certainly the kind of person who does it. The first time you refused the door, you were fighting yourself the whole way. The 10th time, you noticed the pull and let it pass the way you let weather pass, without alarm, without a struggle, because you have finally understood in your body what your mind knew all along, that the door was never a home. It was only a habit dressed as one, and you have outgrown the habit. So before this day ends, do these things. Name the door. In your own mind, plainly, name the one door you closed that cost you your peace, the one you can feel pulling at you even now. Do not dress it up and do not make it smaller than it was. Name what it actually cost you in the currency of your sleep and your voice and your self-regard. Write those costs down if you can, in a short and honest list, so that the next tender evening cannot pretend they never happened. Naming it clearly is the first lock. Then decide your answer now, while you are calm, before the door ever creaks again. Decide what you will do the next time a message comes, a voice softens, a familiar face appears where you did not expect it. Write the decision down if it helps. Say it out loud to yourself, or to one person you trust. So your resolve does not live only inside your own head, where a lonely hour can talk it out of you. Make the decision in the light, so that you are not making it in the dark of a tender evening when your memory has gone generous. And then, tonight, do one small thing that fills your own space, not to distract yourself, to inhabit your life. Cook the meal, take the walk, sit in the chair by the window and let the quiet be yours. Sit in your solitude long enough to feel that it is not an emergency. Make the room your own so thoroughly that no reopened door could ever convince you it was empty. Because a full house needs no visitors to feel complete, and a person at peace with her own company has already closed the door that matters most from the inside for good.